We'll now take up Senate Bill 184.
Senate Bill 184 by Senator Sullivan to transfer the powers and duties of the Arkansas Educational Television Commission and the State Library Board to the Department of Education.
Senator Sullivan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Folks, let me go through a few things on this bill that are critical. First, this is only about the State Library Board. It does not impact your local library boards. They're independent. Your local library board is funded by primarily by your county taxes. So this is only about abolishing the state board. If you look at the appropriations for both ATN, PBS, and the library board, they are formed underneath the Department of Education. Now, the board sits in between the department and the people. So the Department of Education really cannot rescind any orders by the library board. So whatever the library board or ATN decides, that's what happens. They actually have more legal authority than you do when it comes to making those decisions. In the bill, all the funding, all the operations, all remain intact. So we're not taking away any of the power that still remains, only this time it's under the authority of the Department of Education. You know, we've had previous transformations that did not cause mass hysteria or problems with contract issues. So if you're getting questions about whether the contracts will be invalid, folks are already under the Department of Education. And we've done transformation before and not had problems. You know, these boards each meet once per quarter. That's 4 times a year. They meet for 2 or 3 hours. So at the most, they're meeting for 12 hours a year. And they're in charge, and they're the leadership function of the library and ATN. So what happens? What do they do? Well, effectively, the directors of these two organizations are the bureaucrats making those decisions. You know how much training the library board gets if you're on that board? 0. You know how much training the AETN PBS board gets? 0. As a matter of fact, if you watched the last recent meeting Friday with the library board, the president of the library board had to ask the director, what do I do on a motion and how do we move next? They don't know. Our boards will function much more efficiently. And folks, listen, I'm a proponent of the library. Whatever your emails say, I love our libraries. They're important educational institutions, and they need to function that way. The same thing with PBS and AETN. They provide valuable functions, but they can be more valuable and more effective if they're under good leadership. You know, I'm going to take them kind of one at a time, and it saddens me to air some of the dirty laundry that I've got. I FOIA'd the Central Arkansas Library, Nate Coulter, and got probably several hundred pages of his emails between our library director, Ms. Chilcote, and the Arkansas Library Association. There are really several functions. There's the American Library Association, which is a lobbying group at the national level. They're a lobbying group. They set the rules. They're kind of the mothership for all libraries, even down to your county library. Most of your county libraries, many of them have the American Library Association in their policy. So you have the American Library Association, the Arkansas Library Association, the State Library Board. Folks, they function pretty much as one unit. If you were watching the board meeting this week of the library board, there was a motion to extricate the American Library Association from our State Library Board policies. And I'll tell you one of the reasons. The American Library Association, in their platform, say that we will not restrict, no one should restrict anyone from any material, whether that's printed, video, or other. The American Library Association says no one, regardless of your age, your maturity, should be held restricted in access to that information. Now, folks, we've had pretty good discussions about that here in the state. I don't think anybody says that there should be no restrictions. As a matter of fact, in the court decision recently with Act 372, the judge said that you could move material based on sexually explicit material. You can restrict access to that. That's what the judge said. Now, the American Library Association disagrees with that, and they said make it available to everyone. This week, past week, on Friday, the motion was made to draw policy for the library board to have policy on how we could segregate sexually explicit material, not ban, segregate it, which the court said you could do. The library board voted against that. They essentially said that all material should be available at all times, regardless of age. I think we have some failed leadership in these positions. And I want to just go through a few of the things that I've pulled here, if you'll give me just a minute to pull them up. Now, the American Library Association, again, they kind of act as the mothership for all of our libraries. Now, some of your libraries don't adhere to their policies as much as others, but we're talking about the state board, who should have a leadership role in what we in the state do. The American Association this is the ALA past director. She was the director for the National Association, which many of your boards affiliate with. I cannot believe that a Marxist who believes that collective power is possible to build can be wielded for a better world is the president-elect of the ALA. I am so excited for what we can do together, solidarity. Now, that's the president and the past president of the ALA, and our state board took no action. The mission of the ALA, equity, diversity, and inclusion are fundamental values of the association of its members, and diversity is listed as the ALA's key action areas. This is a letter from the president to state departments of education saying we're going to get rid of DEI across all educational platforms. The ALA would be one. This is the Arkansas Library's newsletter, and it lists members of our library board as at least past members of the Library Association. It lists our library director as a managing editor of columns. Now, folks, this is the Arkansas Library Association, of which most of your libraries are members. The State Library Board, all of them have an education email. This is an email from an attorney for CALS, I think. I will give Jennifer Chilcote a call Monday, and she can visit with the Secretary of Education and also see if she can offer any additional insight. However, since the new guy from DeSantis land, I would not count on much help there. That's when the lawsuit was coming against 372 and they're organizing, and our library association, the president, is a part of that. Now, you can assume she's acting with or without the direction of the board. Both of them are bad. Another email. Why not just let the General Assembly tell libraries what books they can approve for circulation? This is from Nate Coulter, by the way. Our legislative bodies have descended into the depths of ignorance and shamelessness not seen in my lifetime. It takes more than a Looney Tunes patron to claim we are peddling obscenity. This is again text messages. The Arkansas State Library was MIA. This is as they're organizing to fight 372 and hiring the ACLU and others. He says the pitiful director of the state library was cowering underneath her desk while her overlords in the ADE and governor's office mocked ALA and the freedom to read principles that all Arkansas State Library employees profess to support. Now think about that. This is from Nate Coulter, who pretty much leads the state association, put up the money from CALS for the lawsuit. And he's complaining that the ADE, the Department of Education, and the governor are mocking ALA for their principles. You know, the ALA supports affirmative, gender-affirming care. They support pronouns. They support much of the things that we voted against as a state. And our library board should be working with our libraries in the direction that we prefer. And get this last statement, that all of the Arkansas state libraries profess to support. So he's making the claim here, and I'm not backing it up, but Nate Coulter is making the claim that Arkansas state libraries support the American Library Association. So when I say the American Library Association is the mothership for these libraries, it's very true. This again from Nate Coulter to Mr. Adams, the attorney. I suppose I understand how the state agency, that's the Department of Education, therefore accountable to ALEVA, takes this stance, but might also strike some as for now, quote, as for now, move on and learn to be good Germans. That's the Arkansas Library Association and the speaking on behalf of them to their attorneys.
Senator Sullivan, I'm going to recognize Senator Leding for a point of order.
Just wondering where this endless reading of somebody's personal correspondence has to do with the policy that the senator is presenting. And we just politely request that he get back to discussing the policy.
Yeah,
Senator Sullivan, you can continue on.
Thank you. This is from, again, just to tie all this together, the Arkansas State Library Board is working with these organizations. They're all one. This is from, I think, the past president of the Arkansas Library Association. They don't call me the Larry Flint of the Hot Springs Library for nothing. I guess you all know who Larry Flint is, Hustler magazine. And his reply from Nate Coulter is, Adam, are y'all peddling porn in Hot Springs to kids? You know, I don't know what the context is, but I can't imagine a good context for that. And these are the people, the organizations that are setting the standard for the state of Arkansas. I've got just a few more. I have a number of emails here that have the Library Association and our director on them. And again, I think you have to assume that if the director knows about this, then the library board knows about it. They reference the Freedom to Read Foundation, which is also the American Library Association. But folks, these are the people that are setting the standard for the state of Arkansas. This is our state library, whose charge it is to work with local libraries and spend the money educational for our students. I've got a bunch of them here. I won't read all of them, but they're all pretty much the same. You know, the director put out a letter, guidance to the libraries, and then about 5 minutes later pulled it down, took it all back and said, don't read this, throw it away. And then shortly thereafter, they published the talking points from the attorney for the Library Association. Okay, let's move on to the PBS because they're both contained in this. Arkansas PBS CEO promises internal changes, no more questionable audit findings. Most of you were here when we went through the audit findings of PBS and AETN. Folks, they were terrible. And you know what action our board took? Zero. You know what action the Department of Ed took? They can't take anything. But we need people who have oversight responsibilities for these boards who are going to direct our state in the right way, that we spend our money, we spend our time, we spend our resources correctly. We had millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars during COVID with no oversight how that money was spent. We were hiring people out of state. And when asked in committee why we weren't building our own, using that money to build our own resources within the state, there was no answer to that. Now, they have since changed, but we don't have good leadership there. And leadership comes from the board. and the board needs to be through the Department of Education. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Senator Sullivan? Senator Mark Johnson, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Sullivan, you were reading some emails, and Senator Leding had a point of order about personal emails. Those were on official emails and from the business website of the individuals, not their personal emails. Is that correct?
Well, it really doesn't make any difference when they're acting in their official capacity, then their personal emails are accessible by FOIA, but these were from their official
But they were obtained
emails.
from
Yes.
their official email account.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Sullivan? Seeing no questions, anyone wish to speak against? Senator Scott, you're recognized to speak against.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm not really feeling well, but I thought it was important that I show up today and speak in strong opposition against Senate Bill 184. A bill, in my opinion, at first glance, which may seem to be a simple restructuring of government, but in reality, it threatens the very foundation of Arkansas PBS and the educational program that thousands of Arkansans rely on. And this is not just about reconsolidating the commissions. It's about power, it's about influence, it's about the control of a vital institution that serves every Arkansan, from our youngest learners to our senior citizens. And so if we pass this bill, we are not just shifting the oversight, we are gambling the future of the Arkansas PBS. And I know some of you have strong feelings against PBS, but this organization operates and is very significant in the state of Arkansas. It receives private and federal funding. I want to remind everyone. So right now, Arkansas PBS receives money from corporate sponsors, nonprofit organizations, and individual donors. And it's my knowledge that the people in these businesses who believe in the value of independent public broadcasting. But let's make no mistake about it, this funding will be at risk if this bill is passed, and I know some of us probably don't care about that. But why are we just continuing to pass legislation like this? Do we not care about the impact it's going to have on the state of Arkansas? If we continue to undermine these organizations just because sometimes our feelings might be hurt by emails, perhaps we should come to a better solution on how we're just making decisions that are truly impacting these organizations and the structures that we have in place. So it means that we're going to cut civic and educational programs, perhaps, and it means that our students and our teachers and our families will have fewer resources, and that might be okay to some, but that shouldn't be okay to all of us. It means that PBS may no longer, and I say may because I don't know, have the ability to broadcast our high school sports. And this gives the athletes an opportunity to showcase their abilities across the state of Arkansas. It means that local projects that tell the story of Arkansan people and their stories and their histories and their struggles, those stories could be lost if we lose this funding. And yet here we are once again, just, and I know that this train is probably already gone. I saw how fast this bill got out of committee, and I feel like we owe Arkansans better than just rubber stamping legislation that has true consequences in this state. And so I ask you, when did we become so casual at passing bills that harm people and harm Arkansans? And how do we just separate ourselves from these votes so easily every week in this chamber? So if we pass this legislation, in my opinion, it chips away at the rights, the opportunities, and the resources of Arkansans. And every week, we should be focusing on the people that sent us here. And we leave those people behind by the legislation that we're passing, and we're just telling them to figure it out. And we shouldn't keep doing this. We can't keep continuing to gut institutions and stripping away the resources and then acting like we're surprised when the consequences really hit in Arkansas. So I'm asking, because I feel like Arkansas PBS, who is going to be directly impacted by this legislation, I feel like they're a pillar of education, of civic engagement, and of public service, and they have been for decades. Are we really willing to risk all of that because of the sake of democracy? Or some of these leaders, you know, had things to say about one of our senators, and I'm not justifying the things that they're saying on public email. That's not justifying. I'm not justifying the actions of grown people. I am not, but all I am saying is this how we're gonna be? Is this the stuff that we're gonna legislate? And so we will jeopardize the funding, knowing that who is gonna suffer? Who is going to suffer from the things that we keep passing out of here? And so I think we should be a problem-solving body. And to me, we're not solving problems. Our solution is to just legislate things because our feelings are hurt by what people are saying in this state about the legislation that we're filing. They have a right to speak their voice because some of it is impactful to marginalized communities that are hurt by the stuff we're passing. And so you can't silence these people. I don't care what you keep trying to pass. You're not going to silence their voices. They're going to be upset. People speak from the right and the left every week about bills that we pass. And I pray that I'm never someone who legislates based off my feelings being hurt. We are a better body than that. And so, colleagues, I know this train is gone. I know you're going to vote however you want to vote. But I stand and I'm speaking because this stuff is not right, and we are a better body than that. And so I ask you to vote against Senate Bill 184.
Anyone wish to speak for? Senator Mark Johnson, you're recognized.
I had a question, Madam Chair, but the speaker has left. Thank you.
Senator Rice, do you have a question of Senator Sullivan?
I had a question of Senator Scott, but she's left the well.
Okay.
And I apologize, Senator Rice. I didn't realize that you had a question. If Senator Scott would entertain it, I would welcome her back to the well, but
I'll yield the dais.
Senator Rice, you're recognized for a question. Thank you, Senator Scott.
Madam
My apologies,
President.
I didn't see you.
Thank you, Senator Scott, for coming back to the well. Just in your speaking, I want to know, were you familiar with the audit findings of the Arkansas PBS director who was responsible over the fact that there were bids given under the $20,000 caps and allowed people to set up a different LLC or business to be able to get by with that thing, and also that there were employees leaving that were complaining about things that were being done and falling on deaf ears? Were you aware of those things?
So I did serve in the House for 6 years, Senator Rice, and I'm sorry because I didn't see you speaking. I didn't see you when you stood up. I was just a little, but I am aware that the audit finding was bad. I just don't think that this is the solution, if that makes sense. But I was aware of the findings with the audit. I sat in those meetings over in Big Mac, like several of you, and that's my response.
Thank you. I just want to see if you were aware of those.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Scott, for coming back to the well to address the question. Senator Mark Johnson, you're recognized to speak in favor.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, let me, while we're, I always feel out here, I always like we're disclosing things. I will disclose. The PBS, or Arkansas Educational Television Network or Commission, is located in my district. It's located in my hometown of Conway. It's something I'm very proud of and a place that I think has served the state well. The founding director of that agency was a former senator, Lee Reeves, who later, for many years, was Ann's predecessor, I believe, as the Secretary of the Senate. So they're an institution that I support, and it's near and dear to my heart. But I look at the bill that Senator Sullivan has brought forth, and it makes perfect sense to me that the educational function, and that's how this was created, not to, let PBS do things that other networks can do and all that. That kind of came along later. The core function of this agency is education. The core function, truly, the most important, I think, is elementary and secondary education. So I think it's a good bill for that matter. Now, I want to share with you something. You may have had the same experience that I have this last week, but I'm very troubled by this. I have been lobbied on this bill by lobbyists who are good people. I consider them friends, but they are independent, hired lobbyists representing the PBS Foundation, Arkansas PBS Foundation. That troubles me. I think we have, and I don't want to get too deep in that. I'll keep my comments relevant to this legislation, but when a nonprofit group that is affiliated with a state agency hires lobbyists to come out here and influence us on legislation, that troubles me. And this has specifically happened. Now, I'm not against lobbyists. I used to be one. But I think there should be a line between what private people do with their money and bring in someone to petition their government for redress of grievance, and when funds that are raised to support an institution such as this, that money is channeled to hire lobbyists to come defeat specific legislation. I'm bothered. And I would be bothered by it if it were something unrelated to this entity or not. I can't speak to the library board, what they've done. They may not have done this. They may have done exactly the same thing. I mean, we all get in the emails, you hear it. But we control how state government is organized. I was actually a little surprised under transformation a few years ago that this wasn't done, because it seemed like the logical place to put the educational entities, all of them, of the state, under the State Department of Education. So for a number of reasons, I ask you to vote for this bill, but we need to send a message that this public policy should be done on its merits and its considerations, and not on the whim of people who can tap funds that are supposed to be for a charitable purpose and use to influence our vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Speak against. I see Senator Letting. You're recognized to speak against.
Thank you, Madam President. I have concerns about transferring both of these bodies, but I'm going to limit my concerns to the PBS board, and not just because the first 8 years of my life growing up on the north side of Springdale where you couldn't get cable, we got exactly 2 channels, local ABC affiliate and Arkansas PBS. So I grew up with that programming, was proud to share it with our daughter when she was born, and remember what an incredible asset and resource Arkansas PBS was during the early months of the pandemic and all the education programming they provided while the schools were briefly closed. I understand that it might make some efficiency sense to transfer the library board under the Department of Education. I'm less convinced that that's the case with the PBS board. I don't know that the department is set up to handle this kind of thing, whether there's going to be some kind of cost to absorbing those responsibilities. But also, the sponsor did address funding and said there shouldn't be any kind of threat to funding, and maybe Senator Sullivan can address this when he closes. I have heard from several people, though, that if the PBS board is moved to the Department of Education, there could be the perception that it's lost its independence, and that might threaten potential federal grants or public support, which could therefore threaten its funding. And I just really don't know why we would threaten such a valuable resource for all Arkansans, and plan to vote no. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Letting. Any senator wish to speak for? Speak against? Senator Tucker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues. I'll be brief. Senator Johnson, just to respond to your point, unfortunately, if this bill passes, I don't think that's going to absolve your concern, because in my experience, the Arkansas Department of Education has folks lobbying us down here on a daily basis. So just for what that's worth. As you all know, there's 2 pieces of this, the library board and AETN. And the fundamental question I have is the same one Senator Scott raised, which is, what are we doing? Like, what problem are we solving with this? And I have yet to really hear an answer to that question. On the library side of things, there is local representation on the state library board for libraries in every single one of your districts. That may be lost if it gets transferred to ADE. Some of y'all who have been down here for a while may remember that when Governor Hutchinson was governor, the funding for libraries was moved to Category C, and that had a much larger impact on rural libraries than it did on Central Arkansas library system. And everything that was listed about Nate Coulter in the presentation would be totally unaffected by anything that happens with this bill, whether it passes or fails. So I'm not sure what the purpose is of moving the State Library Board over, but really the bigger impact is with AETN, and there's several reasons not to move it over. The first is that it depends on the year, but it's generally $1.7 million every year in private funding that goes to the foundation. And then they get grants, and it can be up to $3 million depending on how many grants they get in a particular year. That's 25 to 30% of AETN's funding. Several of those people have just said they're not going to give that money to the Arkansas Department of Education. So AETN risks losing a significant portion of the private half of the public-private partnership that exists that supports AETN right now. Second, which Senator Leding touched on, is editorial independence. If it's part of a government agency, it loses its editorial independence. And related to that, there are two aspects of AETN's relationship with the federal government that require editorial independence. One is about half their funding comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. We don't know if they're going to fund the Arkansas Department of Education. We just don't know. Maybe they will, but we don't know. And then also they have a license with the SEC. They may lose that license if it gets transferred to the State Department. Maybe they won't, but we don't know that. They might. And the question that goes back to the beginning is, why are we doing something that may really harm AETN? For what reason? And there hasn't been a good reason articulated. The last point is, AETN has non-educational aspects of its programming. It has public safety. It provides public safety communications to the people of Arkansas. Why move that to the Arkansas Department of Education? So I really believe this would harm AETN. The truth is, we don't know how much it will harm. And so the question is, why do it? So for those reasons, I'd be happy to take a question.
Question for Senator Tucker. I see Senator Urban. Senator Mark Johnson, you have the question as well.
Thank you. Just a question, maybe you can't answer it, but it could be for Senator Sullivan, because I was trying to read some things about the AETN commissioner responsibilities. If the commissioners are appointed by the governor, correct?
Right.
Okay. And their service is established by what's in legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
They're 8-year terms.
So far as I know, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the legislature could restructure that commission if the commission has failed in its fiduciary responsibility. I'm very familiar with the audit. I hammered them pretty hard on that audit, which was the right thing to do. But if the commission was a fiduciary responsibility, couldn't the legislature just completely re-establish the commission, get rid of everybody that's on the commission, and give the governor the ability to appoint new commissioners and lessen those terms or change it? They could also add the Secretary of Education to the commission. They could add all of that could be done legislatively. Is that correct?
My understanding is everything that you just said is true, and we could give, the pro tem and the speaker an appointment on the commission,
right,
if that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and so that could be something that Senator Sullivan, I'm just trying to understand. I understand, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to have the Department of Education very involved with both the library board and the commission and the commission. I guess I'm just trying to understand if just getting rid of the commission will fix the problems or not, or reestablishing the commission, with more of an Department of Education presence would be the better approach. I'm just trying to understand and figure this out for myself.
Right. I'm not opposed to ADE having an important role with AETN. I think that could be a valuable relationship. But the fact that AETN has the independence right now, private donors give the money to AETN, several of whom have explicitly said they're not going to give the money to ADE, and we could lose the federal license with FCC. I just think those are reasons to pause and consider our options.
Okay. Thank you, and Senator Sullivan could answer those questions perhaps. Thank you.
Senator Mark Johnson with a question. And Senator Hammer, I believe, also has a question for you, Senator Tucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Tucker, you took issue with my statement about the lobbyists. You said we're lobbied all the time by the Department of Education.
Right.
I could be wrong, but do you know if these representatives from the Department of Education, who I presume are full-time employees, starting with Secretary Oliva himself and other people that we all know and love that work over there, they're paid out of state tax dollars, aren't they?
That's certainly my understanding.
But these people that I was referring to, and I hope I can draw a distinction, I was referring to people who are paid with foundation money, which I assume is gifts given, whether it's by the people you say are threatening to withdraw their funding, or other people who watch the telethons and dial up the numbers and call in and give money. I don't know that they necessarily authorized that money to be spent for lobbying as opposed for programming or something. Would you agree that there's a distinction between those two sources of what I just said?
Senator, I have no information about who's paying the lobbyists down here. They may be doing it pro bono for all I know. But if they are being paid, maybe they're being paid by the foundation directly. Maybe they're being paid privately by a supporter of the foundation. And I think all of those facts would be very important to determine the quality of their motives when they come down here. But I will say, in all of those scenarios, whether they're working for free, whether they're being paid directly by the foundation, or whether they're being paid by supporters of the foundation, those are private dollars, and as free Americans, they can spend their money however they see fit, so far as I'm concerned.
Well, would you agree, though, if they're taking a tax deduction, like you give to a 501c3 nonprofit organization, that those funds are not supposed to be spent on lobbying? Would you agree with that?
If there are 501c3 dollars being spent on lobbying, I don't know that that's happening here, for the record, but yes, that is against the law, yeah, up to a certain percentage of the C3's budget. It's a higher percentage with the C4.
Well, I agree with you, absolutely. If someone is, as you said, pro bono or otherwise doing it, that's their right as a free citizen to do it. I've just, if it's an agency that supports, and I presume the foundation is a separate nonprofit. I hope it's 501c3 because I've given to them before and I took a tax deduction. So and these two individuals did not dispute the fact that they were being paid by the foundation. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm glad that you agree that there is a difference there. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Hammer, question for Senator Tucker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Tucker, in the committee, the director of PBS, I think it was, we had asked about any other states that had gone through this process or had similar structure, and I think she cited Iowa, and that, to her knowledge, there had been no disruption to the licensure transfer. Do you remember that conversation, and do you have any insight on that?
I have some updated information. If you'll give me a second, I'll.
Sure. I'm just thinking that would address the concerns of the transfer of licensure.
When that happened in Iowa, this is what I've been told. I haven't independently verified this, but I think it's reliable. When Iowa examined changing their model, the state of Iowa kept Iowa PBS's independence board in place. There were 4 gubernatorial appointees to the board, 4 from institutions of higher learning.
Do you mind quoting your source there? Not that I'm questioning, I'd just like to be able to go look at that.
That was from the director of ATN.
That's from the director. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you.
She also communicated to me that Iowa acknowledged the threat to Iowa PBS's private fundraising and acknowledged that Iowa PBS needed to remain independent for that reason.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Tucker. Anyone else wish to speak for? Anyone else wish to speak against? Seeing no one else, Senator Sullivan, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Governor. Folks, I would submit commissions are the problem. We have too many. We went through a transformation years back. If you remember, about 3 years ago, the House held the library budget, and it took about 3 or 4 votes to pass it. And I would say if the library board and those functions are concerned about funding, it ought to be this body that they're concerned about. I'd also say that some of the comments that were made about loss of funding are, in my words, disingenuous. Folks, all the funding stays. Will they have the staff to staff this? The staff stays. They don't go anywhere. Matter of fact, if you look at surrounding states do this differently all over. In some of the surrounding states, AETN is managed by higher ed. So the idea that all of a sudden things fall apart and we're not going to be funded and not get the money is just not true. Now, if you as a body decide not to fund county libraries, I think to the point pretty close, somewhere between $6 and $7 million, you can do that. It's not in this bill. But all this does is transfer the authority and the decision-making power to the Department of Education. Folks, I'll submit to you that our libraries are great resources. Our AETN and PBS are great resources. They're not operating well. There's poor leadership, and that poor leadership falls to the board, not to the directors, to the board. And if we're going to have boards that fail to engage in critical issues, when you have audits like this, 44 instances where the PBS paid multiple vendors that were located at the same address, 44 instances. 2 instances were $32,000 where the network paid for goods and services before receiving them. 131,000 plus penalty from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. 14,000 plus paid during the review period to an out-of-state law firm that had been on the network's retainer since at least 2014. Folks, we can do better. And the way to do better is have competent leadership, and competent leadership, it right now is where you have direct authority and you have direct input with the Department of Education. And I know you're getting a lot of emails on this, and most of them are false and they're wrong. We need to step forward and do what's right for the state of Arkansas. Thank you, and I'm closed.
Thank you, Senator. Senator has closed. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Boyd? Yes. Bryant? Caldwell? Clark? Crowell? Davis? Dees? Dismang? Dotson? English? Flippo? Flowers? Gilmore? Hammer? Hester? Hickey? Hill? Irvin? Blake Johnson? Mark Johnson? King Leave. Letting? Love? McKee? Murdoch? Payton? Henzo? Petty? Rice? Scott? Stone? Stubblefield? Sullivan? Tucker? Wallace?
Any senator who did not vote, who wishes to vote or wishes to change your vote? I see Senator English, no. Any other senator? Please check the board. Seeing no other senator, please cast up the ballot. By a vote of 23 yea, 8 nay, 3 not voting, SB 184 passes. Please transmit to the House.